What is going on, y'all? It is the Caveman back at it again with the Cave every Thursday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Every Thursday, we take to the airwaves on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook to talk about anything and everything NFL related. And of course, I'm very excited to welcome another very special guest, one of my favorite fantasy follows on Twitter, Dave Kluge. I really appreciate you taking the time tonight. We got a lot to talk about. Luckily, around this time of the offseason, it's usually pretty dead, but the NFL's kind of been active with some drama lately, so there's some stuff we can pick apart. But anyway, give yourself an introduction. Thank you for taking the time again.
Yeah, of course, man. Thanks for having me. I'm Dave Kluge. You can find all of my work, written and video content, over at footballguys.com. Man, I feel so lucky to be working there. I've been a Football Guys subscriber since I was in high school. I mean, this company started when I was 9 years old. Like, I wasn't even thinking about football at the time, and I've been a huge fan forever. So when I got the opportunity to work there, I ran with it. But yeah, you can check out all my stuff there, footballguys.com. I host the Launchpad, which I just had a new episode come out this morning. It is 100% fantasy football focused. We did an episode on dynasty buys and sells, but like you said, we're getting closer to the season, so we'll have much more to talk about as more and more news starts popping up.
Oh, I'm sure you're only getting busier and busier. That time of year, it's almost the beefiest time of year for fantasy football guys. It's really starting to rev up. But yeah, like Dave said, you can go check him out. All of his links will be down in his link tree, his Twitter, his podcast, all that stuff will be down in the description. So be sure to check it out. If you're in the chat, say hello. Joel, how you doing? Thank you for popping in. And let's get right into things here. So the first thing we like to do is talk about some recent events, and then I'll sprinkle around some headlines as we go. I'm talking too fast. The first headline we got here, biggest one running. So NFL players, a handful of them, and we've been getting names, and some big ones have been facing indefinite gambling suspensions, including Colts cornerback Isaiah Rodgers. I mean, I'm sure we're going to echo the same sentiments here, but it's kind of crazy how so many of these guys just in the past couple of years, because of the partnerships with the sports books, they've all fallen guilty of it. And it's a sad reality, but the bottom line is you just got to stay away. What were your immediate thoughts?
Well, I don't know if you saw, but Isaiah Rodgers was actually betting on Colts players over under. So I think that's where it gets really muddy. Like with Calvin Ridley, he was suspended. He was doing parlays on games that he wasn't playing in. That's where I think, like, it was kind of muddy. Like, let him have fun. The guy's not playing football right now. He's playing on games that he isn't involved in. But Isaiah Rodgers putting $1,000 down on a running back over under, that is when things get pretty shady. So I understand, man. They've got a precedent that they got to hold. We've seen in NBA, in the last 15 or 20 years, how there have been some issues with officiating and things like that. So I understand that the NFL has their precedent, that they don't want to, have any accusations of anything shady going on, and players betting on their own teams is certainly pretty shady. So I understand why they have to do it, but when you start comparing to other things that, we don't have to get off onto a huge tangent here, but some of the other things that, you get a little slap on the wrist, 3 games and you're back in there. It's kind of crazy how hard they bring the hammer down on all these gambling issues.
Oh, absolutely. And like you said, it does get muddy when you talk about the specifics of it. And that's, obviously part of the reason why they don't get into the specifics of it. They just got to be clear cut with what the consequences are. And I think they've been pretty straightforward with the consequences that they've been carrying out on players that were caught doing such action. Like you said, Isaiah Rodgers, he wasn't just betting on, anything random at a facility. Like I saw an offensive lineman for the Titans. I can't remember his name. He was betting on something non-football related, but he was at a Titans facility, so he still got hit with something.
That was the Lions thing too. All the guys that got suspended on the Lions, they were betting on other sports. They were betting on NCAA games inside the facilities. That's where I think that maybe we should draw the line. Like, you can bet on other sports, right?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. Like, why couldn't you, in between practice, you're at your stall, you're sweating from being outside for 4 straight hours after you just, were running like crazy. You should be able to go inside. If you want to place a bet on the NCAA, on the MLB, who cares? I mean, it's like that's really where the line should be drawn to some extent. But Isaiah Rodgers decided, hey, I'm thinking it was Zach Moss. I don't know about you. I think it was Zach Moss.
Exactly where my mind was, yeah.
Because he's probably like, this guy's stepping in. He's got a low line. We know we're going to use him this week. Hey, he probably made, $1,000 in profit at the expense of multi-millions in the contract.
salary.
Well, Oh boy. Well, like you said, it is just a little bit unfortunate that when it comes to the business side of things, the NFL's moral compass will always be jaded. But it's just the harsh reality of things. And at this point, if NFL players aren't getting the memo, then I'm not sure what it's going to take. But we'll move right along. Pokemon, thank you for popping in. Happy Thursday is right. Almost the end of the week, thank God. But we'll get into the next segment. We have a couple Q&A questions for you. If you guys have any questions for us, drop them in the comments as well. But I have 3 for you, Dave. The first of which being, as a Bears fan, are you relieved that Rodgers is gone, and do you still view Green Bay as a threat?
So, I'm not a guy that like carries a lot of hate in my heart, and I feel like that's crazy to say for like a diehard sports fan.
Yeah.
But like, I just never got into it. Like, the whole FTP, F the Packers thing. Like,
Mhm.
everybody would just like wear that so proudly in Chicago. And that was never me. Like when I was growing up as a little kid, I didn't know what I was watching in football, but I knew that I was enamored by Brett Favre. I was like, this guy is fun to watch. And like
Mhm.
my dad used to like, shut up, you can't say that about Brett Favre. But I just liked him. And then Aaron Rodgers took over. And it's the same thing. Like, I don't understand how you can be a fan of the game and then watch Aaron Rodgers, who I think is the best quarterback of all time. I mean, sure, Tom Brady's got the rings and he's got the numbers and stuff like that. But the things that Aaron Rodgers did, I mean, Mahomes might get there eventually. Josh Allen is doing some really fun things, but Aaron Rodgers was so ahead of his time. You look at this like new breed of quarterbacks, they have all tailored their game off of what Aaron Rodgers was able to do. So I guess like as a Bears fan, yeah, I'm happy that he's gone because it does make the division a little bit softer.
Yeah.
But as a fan of the game, I always liked Aaron Rodgers. I mean, I just don't understand how people can watch him play and be like, oh, this guy sucks. When if you're a fan of the game, you got to appreciate the talent, in my opinion.
I'm right there with you. And as someone that started off as a football fan and as a Bills fan that slowly kind of became a content creator, I started to, take on that same opinion. And being a Bills fan, of course, Tom Brady only ever lost to us 3 times in his career. So we all hate Tom Brady, or we're supposed to. But, I started to appreciate how good Tom Brady was and, what he was able to do on the field to us wasn't personal. For one, he just was beating up on a bad team. But for two, you just got to appreciate greatness. And ironically enough, I was at the Bills Chiefs divisional round game a couple of years ago in Kansas City. And obviously, as a Bills fan, it broke my heart the way that game ended. But at the same time, I got to sit back and say, you know what? I just attended what could possibly go down as the greatest football game of all time, at least the most entertaining. I mean, it really was just electrifying, a roller coaster ride. And it was a blast, regardless of the finish. And from a football fan, I was able to appreciate it. So I could not agree more in the sense that you just got to appreciate the game for what it is.
And then the second part of the question, I'll answer really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
No, I've got the Packers finishing 4th in the division this year. And I don't want to relish in it too much. Some Packers fans watching here, but I'm sorry, Packers fans, but your time is over. You got Brett Favre, you got Aaron Rodgers. Jordan Love just ain't it.
Are you sure you're not being a little bit spiteful with the Bears love coming out in that prediction a little bit?
Maybe a bit, but I mean, I just haven't seen anything from Jordan Love that really excites me. And I think that the Packers front office is a little bit disillusioned at this point because they have stumbled into back-to-back Hall of Fame quarterbacks and they think that it's going to work again. But you look at the supporting cast that's around Jordan Love. I don't think there's a lot of, first year starters that could walk into that position and succeed. Christian Watson is good in his own right, but he's got some glaring deficiencies as a wide receiver. And then, after that, I don't even think most casual fans could name another wide receiver on the Packers. You're looking at Romeo Doubs and Samori Toure and Jaden Reed. And, you got a rookie tight end and Luke Musgrave. And, Aaron Jones is probably going to be the engine that keeps that offense going. But there really isn't a lot to get excited about if you're a Packers fan right now. So, even if Jordan Love is a very good quarterback, Aaron Rodgers is a very good quarterback, and he struggled in this offense last year. So now you're taking out a Hall of Fame quarterback and swapping in somebody who's never started a full season with a huge lack of supporting talent around him. So I've got the Packers going down for 4 wins this year.
Wow, 4 wins. That's got to be, bottom 5 in the league, right? I mean, based on a very general metric, not many teams are getting below 4 wins. It's probably bottom 5, right?
Yeah, I bottom 3 up there with the Cardinals and the Bucks.
Wow. Wow. All right. We'll see what happens with that. I think it's a little bold. I'm not gonna lie. I think it's a little bold just because I have a little bit more faith in what Joe Barry provided last year. That was a very disappointing 3/4 of the season from that Packers defense. I mean, everybody, including myself, thought it was going to be stout and one of the best units. Turned out to be the complete opposite. But near the end of the year, it seemed like they tightened up, and that's when they actually started to run the table. So I'm thinking they might have to lean on their defense, of course, for the reasons you explained. And, if it works out, I guess that'll be the determining factor in their season, at least in my eyes. But who knows? 4 wins. I'll be watching out for that one. All right.
Maybe a bit of spite in that prediction.
Just a tiny bit, just maybe. All right. The next question I got for you, and I'm very excited to hear this answer. What does your dream fantasy football league look like? What format, what rules from top to bottom, what specifics down to the nitty gritty would you like to see in a fantasy football league if you were to build it exactly how you like it?
So I actually tweeted about this last offseason, and I got a lot of flack because everybody's into the tight end premium and super flex and 0.25 per carry, yada, yada, yada. I think that fantasy football in its purest form is just a 10-team league. You can go either half PPR or full PPR. I prefer half PPR, but I like it kind of more bare bones where you got one quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 or 3 wide receivers, and then a tight end. I think where you can get fun with that, though, like to push it a little bit further, is just add a bunch of flex spots. And that's what we ended up doing in my home league. We've got 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a tight end, and then we have 4 flex spots. So it gives you a ton of creativity how you want to build your team. You can choose to go running back heavy. You can choose to go wide receiver heavy. We've got some people who will just go bully tight end, try to walk away from the draft with Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, all those guys, basically just block anybody else in the league from having a tight end and then start those guys in their flex. So that's how I like doing it. But I think the most important thing of a fantasy football league, if you really want to make an awesome fantasy football league, is to have a live draft where you actually get together and do the draft live. We live in this digital age now, and I'm, a lot of the leagues I'm with league mates that I've never met in person before, and, random analysts from all over the country, and we end up in these leagues together. But the best league that I am in is my home league. I commission it. We're heading into year 14 now. We started this league right as we were getting out of high school, and it's been running ever since. And I'm out in Colorado. I'm from Chicago originally, so most of my buddies are still out there. But we have people that are in Arizona, California, Chicago, Colorado, scattered all over the country. And this is the one time a year where we still get together every single year with the same buddies from high school. And we just have a blast doing it. And these are like my best friends in the world. And, we were buddies in high school, but even there was like the fringe guy that was in the fantasy football league that has now become like an integral part of our group. And we stand up in each other's weddings, and we're the godfathers to each other's children. And our wives and fiancés and girlfriends have all become friends over the years. And, I could say that we've just, stayed in touch since high school. But the reality is, if this fantasy football league didn't exist, we probably all would have gone our separate ways. Maybe 2 guys here would still hang out and 2 guys here, but this keeps all 10 of us together. So that's what I like about fantasy football, is the camaraderie that it brings. So we can talk about all of the different settings and formats and, roster scoring and stuff like that. But I think at the end of the day, the most important thing about a fantasy football league, if you want to have a good one, is to get together for that in-person draft.
Man, that was about as good of an answer that you could have come up with, and it wasn't even something that I had crossed my mind. You could not be more correct. It is. I always am disappointed whenever I had a league, I think it was last year, the year before, that went to an online draft that was consistently in person because people started moving away, and I'm like, really, this is like the best part of the year. And even just for me personally, I think the draft itself is the best time of fantasy football without a doubt. And I love just I'll get myself in far too many leagues that are not best ball, that are just real time managing leagues, because I just love to draft. I don't turn down an invite to a fantasy league just because I love to draft. But then on top of the part of being in person, doing it with your friends, like you said, the leagues that are the most fun, the ones that are with your friends, that you're seeing, competing, talking shit with, you could not be more on the dot. And that was a good answer too. Just with the standard part, just keeping it bare bones. I see people with tight end premiums like 0.25 per carry. That's insane. I don't like the idea of defensive players. I think 10 people. I like full point PPR. I think it adds more value to guys that probably wouldn't be rostered. But 4 flex, that is something I've never considered. I don't know. I'd have to throw that one out there to my group to see how that would go.
And what we did is we just kept adding one a year. It's like, hey, let's add a second flex spot. Hey, that was fun. Let's add a third. Hey, let's add a fourth. And now we're at a 4, and I think that's where we pump the brakes. But one other thing that I'll just throw out there. This is kind of a story. An old coworker of mine was in a fantasy league. They had a $1,500 buy-in, which sounds crazy, right? But the winner of the league it was winner takes all. So 10 people, $1,500, winner gets 15,000. But then the winner of the league, it was their responsibility to host the draft party the next year and cover everybody's expenses. So really what it was is they're basically paying $1,500 for a trip that they do every single year. But then the winner gets the 15 grand and then sets everybody's flights up and picks the destination, whether it was in Vegas or they did Mexico one year. And the winner would set up this huge draft party somewhere in the world using all of the winnings. So basically, they weren't really playing for money. They were paying $1,500 a year to be a part of this group. And then the winner would have their choosing of where they wanted to have this big in-person draft every single year. I always thought that was a cool idea, but you need some hardcore people with money to put together something like that.
Oh yeah. I mean, you gotta not really, have a week-to-week budget if you're going ahead and throwing $1,500 for a fantasy league. But that's awesome, man. I mean, that's another creative idea. So many people, and thanks to social media, I've seen so many great ideas for punishments or ways that people run leagues. It's just the growth that fantasy football has endured over the last couple of years, and whether people like it or not, it helps a lot that sports betting and stuff has really become popularized, and the idea of fantasy football and best ball and all these things. It's really.
I don't want to hang too much on this question, but since you're talking about punishments, I'll throw one more out.
Yeah, I was honestly going to ask you what punishments do you think are good?
So my biggest initiative in fantasy football, as much as I want to talk about the numbers and who to draft and all that, my biggest thing is keeping fantasy football fun, because at its core, that's what fantasy football is all about. Winning money, friendships, and all that stuff on top of it is fun, but keeping fantasy football fun. So the same home league that I'm in, that I talked about, the 4 flex leagues, we all get together for the in-person live draft. We have a weekly punishment, and the lowest scorer of the week, I don't even know how we started doing this. We started doing it 8 years ago, but the lowest scorer of the week has to go pick up a tall boy, a 24-ounce beer. They have to shotgun their beer and videotape it and then give their predictions for the next week's matchups. And I'm talking about the fantasy predictions. So they have to sit there, shotgun a 24-ounce beer, and then they're burping, holding it back in, saying, I got Ben beating Dave and I got Troy beating Peter. And it makes for some of the funniest videos. And over the years, they just keep stepping it up with how we do the production and the ideas with these videos. So that is a fun little caveat that we added to our league about 5 years ago, and it makes the league so much fun.
Oh my God. Every week our league had turmoil over the end of the year punishment. I mean, every week, that would be crazy. On that note, do you guys do head-to-head scoring still, or are you guys just a points for per week kind of deal?
So we do 2. If anybody's playing on Sleeper, actually, they call it League Median, and I think that's perfect. So what you do is you get a chance. You're basically playing 2 matchups every single week. You're playing one head-to-head against your your opponent, and then you're playing another matchup essentially against the field, where if you are in the top half of scoring in your league, so you can finish the week 2-0, 1-1, or 0-2. If you get beat by your opponent and you have a low score, you go 0-2. But if you end up, having a really high score and you beat your opponent, you go 2-0. But then you could also go 1-1. If you've got one of those tough beats, everybody knows how terrible it is to be the second highest scorer of the week, but you're playing the highest score. This way, you get to at least walk away with 1 win instead of going completely winless.
Yeah, I forgot that was an option, because we were arguing. I'm the guy that ends up with 8, 9, 10 wins, but somehow has the second, third least points scored. I play the joke is I play the best defense in fantasy football. Usually I am stout defensively with no matter who I play against, and people hate that's how it is because the head-to-head scoring. But I forgot that was even a choice. Another thing that I'll throw out there too.
I think another thing too, if you're playing for money where you got to buy in, rather than making all of the money the winner at the end of the league or through the payouts, what we do is 10% goes to the regular season highest scorer. So after week 14, whoever has the highest score, they get 10% of the pot. So that's a nice way to just to, keep everybody playing, because it sucks. If you're the highest scorer and you're the 3 or the 4 seed, you don't get that buy. At least you're getting a little kickback at the end of the year.
Yeah, right. There's just some incentive to keep people involved, because that does become an issue for people. At least if your league is more serious, I'd like to think that it's not. But you know how fantasy football can get. But we can talk about that. I'm sure we could go on and on about fantasy specifically for 4 more hours, but I'll keep the train moving here. My third question for you, a little bit more specific. What is the best / most memorable moment or experience of your content career thus far?
Man, I've had a lot of big moments, getting to do a show with Mike Taglair, rest in peace. That was a huge one for me. He was a Chicago guy that I really kind of modeled a lot of my analysis after. But believe it or not, I think the biggest milestone that I just had was earlier this week. I moved out to Colorado about 5 years ago. My wife and I moved out here, but I'm from Chicago originally, and I got invited on NBC Sports Chicago. So, I kind of keep my career quiet. I don't talk about it a lot on Facebook and Instagram. That's more of my personal social media accounts. So I don't think a lot of people really knew what I was doing. They knew that I talk sports, but I don't like to toot my own horn too much.
Yeah.
So this was an experience where I got to, post on Facebook where my aunts and uncles and cousins and old classmates and old coworkers and everybody, I said, hey, turn on channel 34 tonight at 6 p.m. and I got to be on TV in Chicago. So that was a cool experience. I had people that were out at the bar and, taking pictures of my face up on the TV and sending it to me. So that was it was just a 10-minute spot, nothing crazy. Just got to talk about Bears for 10 minutes. But being on Chicago TV was a really cool experience. My niece, she's 6 years old, and she saw me on TV. And as soon as it was over, she said, "Hey, Mama, rewind it." So she rewound it, and she ran up and hugged the TV. And so that was cool, just kind of getting to share where I'm at in my career with all my family back at home.
Yeah, I mean that has to be a moment of fulfillment, surreal. I mean, that's a lot of different emotions, and I'm sure hearing the story of your niece, that's probably pretty awesome. So, congratulations for that. And I know we were talking a little bit before the show too, and just I'm sure getting the position with fantasy guys or football guys, and just being able to really go full time. I mean, so many points that a lot of guys they dream of getting to, and being able to just get to sit in your shoes. I mean, it's pretty damn awesome. And once again, congratulations. There's a reason you are so many people's, favorite fantasy football follow, myself included.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. So congratulations, man, for that. And just, how far you've come up to this point. You definitely deserve it all. All right. So we'll move right along out of the Q&A questions, and we'll get into the topic that I like to call the hilltop of hypothesis. So if you're not familiar with the hilltop of hypothesis, I ask my guests prior to the show if they have a take that they would die defending no matter what. Everyone has a take like this, whether it revolves, whether it's something that they've been defending for years. Everybody has something. Here we have one from Dave. Why don't you explain it? He says Justin Fields will be the first Bears quarterback to throw for 4,000 yards. This one I know could take some people by surprise. I think you might have to defend yourself.
Yeah, I went extremely spicy. If you're talking about dying on a hill, it would have been boring for me to come out here and say, Justin Fields is going to throw for 18 touchdowns this year or something like that. I wanted to put a little bit of spice in this take here, and I'm hopeful that it can happen this year, which would be mind-numbing after what we saw last year. But at some point in his career, Justin Fields will be a 4,000-yard passer. That's what he was drafted for. I mean, I think people are quick to forget because of what we've seen through his 2 years in his NFL career is that he is an unbelievable athlete and he runs all over. But anybody that watched him in college is kind of surprised to see this Justin Fields because in Ohio State, he wasn't running that much. He was a prolific passer, hitting Chris Olave and Marvin Harrison Jr. and Garrett Wilson and Jackson Smith-Njigba. And, he certainly had the benefit of playing with some really good wide receivers there, but now the Bears are trying to recreate that and give him the personnel so he can be in a passing offense. And it's something Ryan Poles, the GM, has talked about a lot, that, if you want a quarterback to find long-term success in the NFL, they have to do it as a passer. And last year, it was kind of born out of necessity that he was running for his life all the time. You go back and watch the film, they weren't designing runs for Justin Fields. He was dropping back, and the offensive line couldn't stop a nosebleed. Every single wide receiver was covered downfield, so he had no choice but to run for his life. And now this year, they beefed up the offensive line by bringing in Ben Powers, who from Buffalo, a very good utility guard that is going to fit in there. They've got some young talent on the offensive line that should take a step forward this year. But the biggest thing is DJ Moore. DJ Moore's a guy that, I think a lot of people look at his overall metrics and say, he's just 1,000-yard, 4 or 5 touchdown receiver. But, Stephon Diggs, You look at what Stephon Diggs before he was in Buffalo, that's kind of what he was doing, just 1,000 yards and a few touchdowns a year, nothing special. And then he gets linked up with a young and ascending star like Josh Allen, and all of a sudden he explodes. He helps Josh Allen develop. And again, I'm going back to Ryan Poles and the things that he has said. But when they talked to him last year, they said, you've got this young and raw quarterback in Justin Fields. What are you going to do to make sure that he's set up for success? He goes, well, some other teams have already laid out the blueprint, and we're going to follow that. We saw what the Arizona Cardinals did, bringing in DeAndre Hopkins for Kyler Murray. We saw what the Buffalo Bills did, bringing in Stephon Diggs for Josh Allen. And this was before the Philadelphia Eagles went out and traded for A.J. Brown. So really, it seems like, it's not a guaranteed fix, but we saw it also with Amari Cooper and Dak Prescott. When you have this young quarterback who has shown some flashes, you go out and get him a stud wide receiver, and that's what DJ Moore is. And DJ Moore, his entire career, has played with awful quarterbacks on run first, slow pace teams. Like I said, it's very similar to Stephon Diggs. So now with a better offensive line, DJ Moore, a healthy Chase Claypool, a healthy Darnell Mooney. Now we got Robert Tonyan and Cole Kmet, two very good pass catching tight ends. They used their 4th round pick on Roschon Johnson, who's a fantastic pass catcher. They have surrounded Justin Fields with a completely different personnel than last year. Last year it was N'Keal Harry and Equanimous St. Brown and Amir Smith-Marset. And those are run blocking wide receivers. I mean, those aren't guys that are getting open deep downfield. So now he's got the personnel to take that step forward. If it doesn't happen this year, within the next 2 or 3 years, we're going to see Justin Fields pass for 4,000 yards.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think it's almost inevitable. I mean, we're just trending in a way that the NFL 4,000 yards is a lot, but it's like, it's getting to a point where, it's kind of like a 1,000-yard season for a receiver now. It's getting to be kind of normal, and it's how the top teams succeed is because the quarterback is consistently passing efficiently. And Justin Fields, I think, like you mentioned, coming out of Ohio State, he showed that he could do it. He just needs the help around him. And on that note, too, which is a little bit on an off tangent, I wanted to ask you, for CJ Stroud, kind of a similar case here. He's coming out of Ohio State, pocket passer, super accurate, but people are concerned that he had too good of a supporting cast. Now he's going to go to Houston. He's going to struggle. He doesn't have the receivers, yada, yada, yada. Do you think CJ Stroud takes that, I don't want to say next step because it's almost regression in a way, but do you think he kind of explodes on the scene to being the super athlete that nobody even really expected him to be? Because he did display some athleticism at the end of the year. And same for Justin Fields. I mean, they can run when they have to. And I think CJ Stroud might just end up being kind of going down the same path that Justin Fields did.
Yeah, and that's the exact reason. I play a lot of dynasty football as well, where you're playing, long-term fantasy football. And before the NFL draft, I had CJ Stroud as my QB1 ahead of Bryce Young. And I was very much so in the majority there, but for that exact reason. We know Bryce Young has next to no rushing upside. I mean, it's going to take him getting clocked in the open field once to say, no, I don't want to do that again. I mean, you're not going to see Bryce Young running all over an NFL field, but CJ Stroud, he's got that prototypical size. And like you said, he's a very underrated athlete. So he was so blessed at Ohio State to be able to stand tall in the pocket and hit those wide receivers, but he's got some untapped upside as well. So that's why I had him ahead of Bryce Young since day one, because we didn't see the rushing upside so much in college, but I think we see it a lot more now at the NFL level. So it wouldn't, I think Justin Fields is a much better prospect, passer, athlete, pretty much everything better than CJ Stroud. Yeah. But I think that we're going to see a similar trajectory to what Justin Fields has done through his first couple of years.
Yeah. And, if that's what it takes to, kind of break the ice, get these guys comfortable. I mean, we saw it with Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts. I mean, the best way to get these guys comfortable is not just getting them a star wide receiver, but just letting them be athletes too. At the end of the day, that's what they are. They're athletes that are going to win you games with their athleticism, and then you evolve them into being, eventually that better quarterback. That's also been kind of a blueprint with these younger guys that are able to be mobile and run, is just allowing them to get a first down with their legs. If there's somebody open 20 yards downfield and he misses the read, so be it. He got you 12 yards on the ground and ran somebody over. I mean, sometimes it's just what it requires to get their confidence up and get their legs underneath them.
And that's exactly what I was going to say. You look at Justin Fields, you wouldn't think that he's coming off a 3-win season. This man is dripping with confidence because he knows that he can make plays that nobody else in the NFL can make. So, he doesn't even care about the record last year. He knows that he belongs in the NFL, and you can see him just brimming with that confidence.
Oh, yeah. And I'm super excited to see him this year because I we saw Lamar when he had his breakout season where everybody's calling him running back and et cetera, et cetera. Then he threw for 30 touchdowns, 4,000 yards, and because that's what the running does for you. I mean, it just opens up the field in so many ways because people get terrified. And I think I'm at a point where I think Justin Fields this past season, what he was able to do, as special as Lamar is in the open field, I mean, Justin Fields is just a blur, man. I mean, it's crazy how slow he makes defenders look. And once he gets an angle on you, he just knows how to take angles. That's what's important too with Justin Fields' running style, is that he knows how to take an angle and hit the hole or hit the edge to the sideline. He is super, super fun to watch. And regardless if you think he can pass or not, even though he can, you just have to acknowledge the fact that he's a freaking entertaining player. All right, so we'll move right on along, and I guess to a final note, I think that's definitely going to happen as well. I would 100%.
I love that.
All right, so we'll move right along here. We're going to get into our second headline of the day, and this is something I wanted to touch on last week, but didn't get a chance to, but the conversation is still relevant. The running backs are really getting the cold shoulder in the open market as of late. Dalvin Cook supposedly got an offer from, I think it was the Dolphins. I don't know if the Jets offered him anything, but there's still names like Zeke, Kareem Hunt, Leonard Fournette, Dalvin Cook, of course. These names that are out there that if you would have told me 3, 4, 5 years ago would be out on the open market and nobody would be interested, I would be, I don't know. I mean, I just would act like you're crazy. I'd tell you you're nuts and, go have a field day somewhere else. But it's a different reality in the NFL today. And Jim Trotter from The Athletic actually wrote an article about how he is, still a part of the minority that believes that running backs still provide a value similar to any other non-quarterback. And it's just kind of tough at this point to really make that argument. Where do you stand on this whole thing?
So I think, we talk about so many like generalizations in football, and one of those generalizations is running backs don't matter. And that was an article that was written 10, 12 years ago, and since then people just blindly parrot running backs don't matter, running backs don't matter. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think average running backs don't matter. And unfortunately, I think that's kind of where some of these guys fall right now. Dalvin Cook and Leonard Fournette, Ezekiel Elliott at this point in their career. But I think that we've seen over the last few years that those elite running backs still do matter in a big way. I mean, Derrick Henry dragged a team to the playoffs 3 consecutive years on his back, like with no supporting cast around him, just single-handedly was bringing teams to the playoffs. And then we saw with the San Francisco 49ers last year. I mean, they were a good team, no doubt, but then they made that trade, made a big investment. Like they gave up draft picks for Christian McCaffrey and took on his contract because Christian McCaffrey is that type of difference maker. So I think the issue is that running backs wear down quickly. I mean, like me in fantasy, fantasy analysis, I'm looking at all these hardcore efficiency numbers. I'm talking rushing yards over expectation per attempt and juke rate and missed tackle rate and broken tackle rate. And you see it consistently. Like a running back turns 27 and they get better and they get better and they get better. And then they turn 27 and they just fall off a cliff. And that's just where Leonard Fournette is right now. And Dalvin Cook and Kareem Hunt and all these guys we're talking about. Rushing yards over expectation per attempt is my favorite efficiency metric. And all of these guys ranked in the bottom 25% last year. And, with the likes of James Conner and Melvin Gordon, and the only young guys you see on that list were Cam Akers, James Robinson, and Najee Harris, who were all injured. So basically what you're looking at with these guys who were stud running backs for the majority of their career are now 27, 28 years old. They're basically giving you the same production as an injured 23-year-old running back for 5 times the cost. So I understand why they don't want to bring these guys in. And it's just tough. I mean, like if I'm going to have kids someday, my wife and I are working on it, and there's no way in hell my kid is playing running back. I can tell you that much. I mean, it is just terrible the way that these guys are treated. You see guys like Odell Beckham Jr., years removed from playing football. He's got a bum knee. We don't know what this guy's going to look like. And he's getting like $15 million to play. And then meanwhile, you got a guy like Leonard Fournette who could step in, might not be the most efficient, but he can handle 18 touches a game. And he can't even get a job for $2 or $3 million. So it's tough to see because, from watching football, that the running back position is important, But the problem is that it's just so replaceable. You don't
Yep.
have to pay up for these high-end running backs because there's only 2 or 3 guys in the league that are really worth paying up for, and all these free agents that you mentioned just aren't that good anymore. They shouldn't be getting that money, and that's what they want.
Yep, and it really is a harsh reality, especially because we're transitioning or have transitioned now from a point where football was primarily driven offense wise was primarily on the ground. I mean, the NFL used to be so ground predominant. That was how NFL offenses operated forever up to this point. Every single season, up to probably the last 10 years or so, that's how offenses progressed down the field was on the ground because that was, relatively primitive way to do it. And then, of course, offenses started to get more complicated and intricate. But, give the ball to your best player and let them run. That was the mantra. But now things are changing. And 27 years old. We've heard this many times before. We heard it prior to last season how people were kind of weary about Derrick Henry because he's, I think is he 28 now? Well, maybe now he is
29. He'll be 30 in
29.
January.
Wow. Well, I mean, he still had a good season. Everybody was terrified of Derrick Henry.
He is the outlier. Like when we're talking about, age curves and not paying running backs, all these things, throw it out the window when discussing a Derrick Henry because he is the outlier.
I think McCaffrey's over 20 or at least 27 too, right? Because I would say he's probably fitting in that outlier category. He ran harder than I feel like I've ever seen him run in his career with San Francisco. So
he had his most efficient year last year, and that's the thing. Like, and that's why I said Derrick Henry and Christian McCaffrey are the two guys that kind of defy logic because they're the guys worth paying up for because somehow in their age they're getting better and they're worth the money.
Yeah, absolutely, and it is sad, but Zeke, Leonard, Dalvin, I think eventually they're just going to have to bite the bullet and take what somebody will give them, and that's they're going to be on a roster at some point. I doubt that all of these guys go into the season not signed somewhere. And I honestly thought that your Chicago Bears might be interested in Dalvin when he went out there on the market, just because I feel like there's no alpha in that backfield yet. I know Khalil Herbert's probably going to be the name. I like Donta Foreman a lot. I really like Foreman. But I just thought maybe they want, a lead name, a big name star guy back there to surround Justin Fields with. But apparently it seems like he'll be going elsewhere.
The other thing too is, you hinted at it a little bit, but you just don't have that guy that goes out and gets 350 touches a year. Like it used to be every team had that guy. And then it's like, he's not looking as good. Let's bring in this new guy and give him 350 touches. And now it's Bill Belichick is the one that really changed the game. Now you see like every running back has the specialized role. So you talk about the Bears, for instance, and what I see is that Khalil Herbert is the explosive, can get out wide and rip off big plays, so he'll get the early down work. You got Roschon Johnson, who can catch balls and pass block. He'll be the third down back. And then you've got Deonta Foreman for short yardage and running out the clock at the end of the game if they've got the win. So even though there isn't one, you say lead back or alpha back, whatever, they've got three guys that each have their role and do that one job very, very well. So that's the thing right now, Dalvin Cook. No team is signing Dalvin Cook off the street and giving him 20 touches per game. Even if he goes to Miami, cool. That's great. But Jeff Wilson Jr. is the better short yardage guy. Devin Achane, he's got better speed. He's going to be getting some of the early down work as well, and you're going to be splitting that. And then Buffalo Bills are tied to rumors about Dalvin Cook as well. But Damian Harris is fantastic at short yardage work. You got James Cook, who's a very good third down back. It's not like Dalvin Cook is just going to show up and be the guy that he was in Minnesota. Wherever he lands, he's going to be in a committee.
Oh yeah, and whether he likes it or not, that's the reality. I mean, I think Dalvin Cook is probably. I think he'd be bordering. I have to make a list, bordering top 20 maybe, that might be a little generous. I think Raheem. I said it the second that he got cut and he got linked to the Dolphins. I think Raheem Mostert. I would take Raheem Mostert over Dalvin Cook at this point, without a doubt. And people called me crazy. Like I got ridiculed for saying something like that. And I don't know. I mean, all you got to do is watch, man. Dalvin Cook, I know he ripped off a couple big ones. Hey there, buddy. I know he ripped off a couple big ones. He had that screen pass go to the house and that big comeback against the Colts. He ripped one off against us. He ripped one off against. He had a few big ones. I'll give it to him, but he just does not take contact on at all anymore. The second he gets touched, he falls to the ground instantly. Raheem Mostert, though, on the other hand, I became a Raheem Mostert fan just because people were telling me I'm nuts. So I became a Mostert fan instantly for that.
So that was actually, you must have followed me last offseason because that was like my big thing. I was telling everybody, I was like, guys, Chase Edmonds is terrible. Like, Chase Edmonds is so
Yep.
bad, and nobody wanted to hear it. I was like, he doesn't fit in the scheme. He's undersized. He's slow. Like, don't look at these like yards per carry number, yards per catch number, because he was getting cleanup duty in Arizona against, third stringers at the very end of games, padded his numbers against soft runs. And like, Chase Edmonds was everybody's favorite sleeper last year. And I was telling everyone, I'm like, Raheem Mostert's the guy you want. Like, if he can stay healthy, Raheem Mostert is a dog, and he looked good last year.
He looked great. And I really would like to see him still be the primary guy over there, but I do think it'll be Delvin will probably end up there.
I think he's 31 years old now, but you can kind of look at him through a different lens. Yeah, he's old.
Oh, wow, I did not know
he missed like 4 years to injury, and he wasn't a workhorse back in college either. So even though he's getting up there in age, he's got as many carries under his belt as most like 25, 26-year-old running backs do. So he might be able to stretch it out for even a couple more years.
Wow, I did not know he was that. That's crazy. I guess I remember Raheem Mostert being on the 49ers, what feels like 10 years ago now.
Yeah, like, just turned 31 in April.
Wow. Good for him. Good for Raheem Mostert for running like that at the age of 30. That's pretty awesome. All right, so poor running backs. We'll have to move on from it just like everyone else. Anyway, on to our next segment here. This is going to be the Caveman's Advocate segment. And as I explained to you, Dave, prior to the show, for anybody watching that is unfamiliar, the Caveman's Advocate is where I am going to present a topic that will be presented as a debate to my guest. And they are going to pick a side on the debate. I don't have to agree with them, regardless of what side they take. I'm going to try and play devil's advocate, hence Caveman's Advocate, and try to carry on the conversation. And then at the end, I'll reveal what side I actually truly believe in. And we'll talk about it from there. So the Caveman's Advocate topic is going to be this. And I saw this conversation sprinkle around a little bit over the last week or so. Has Joe Burrow had fraudulent postseason runs? What do you think?
I don't. And you were kind of giving me a little bit for the 4-win Packers projection, saying that may have come from a place of spite. I think as the Bills fan here, this might be coming from a little place of spite as well. Joe Burrow's good, and I can't get behind it. I mean, he's got a W against Kansas City, and that's tough for anybody to do, but to do it as a second-year quarterback, I don't think there's anything fraudulent about Joe Burrow's runs. I'm just, like I said, we're talking about Aaron Rodgers earlier, just trying to appreciate the greatness. Yeah. Me sitting here in the NFC, a super soft conference, watching these haymakers getting thrown back and forth by Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow and Josh Allen for years and years to come. There's a lot of good talent in the AFC. I think it's tough to look at anybody's run through an AFC playoff and say that it was a fraudulent or a soft run.
That's fair. I mean, that is fair. But I will say, I was a part of this. Well, hold on. Before I go that route, I will first refute you. Even though even though he did have a difficult, of course, his path through the AFC for anybody is going to be difficult. When you really break it down, and today I watched every game back from his postseason run. I really committed to the no side. So if you said yes, I was kind of screwed because I really committed to no here. Went back and watched every game, all 7. And I mean, there's truth to this. There is some truth to the fraudulent run narrative against Las Vegas. I think his game against Las Vegas, his first playoff game.
Yeah.
That was as crazy as this might sound, this probably was his best game. And what I noticed throughout all of these games up until his last game against Kansas City this past year was that Joe Burrow was not a difference maker in a positive or negative way. He did a very good job of, even when he was struggling, not making big mistakes that were going to cost his team, but also, sometimes struggling to extend plays or taking sacks when he shouldn't, or, maybe I wasn't watching the all 22 for some of them, but just, maybe missing a read left or right. He wasn't necessarily going over the top and exceeding his job description, if you will. And I really did notice that on a consistent basis. And there were times where, he did get bailed out by his defense or his kicker in the 2021 run. Evan McPherson suddenly turned into Justin Tucker and couldn't miss a kick. But, let's say, for example, I went crazy with this. Don't think I'm crazy. We have, for example, against the Chiefs in 2020, this past year, Joe Burrow, he started to rely on the jump ball. He was pressured 21 times in that game. He was overwhelmed. But you could tell the game plan was chuck it up and hope to God that my star receiver is going to make a play. It worked earlier. I think they tied the game I think it was at 20 when he threw it up to T. Higgins. He caught it over one of the cornerbacks for Kansas City, and it worked. And Joe Burrow's like, okay, I'll try it again. Eventually, it got to a 4th and 3 or 4th and 6, something to that nature. Later on in the game, he gets flushed. He throws down the field. Jamar Chase is double covered. He jumps up and catches it. And this, continued to be a little bit of a trend throughout the game. But he threw 2 interceptions doing it. And those 2 interceptions ended up being relatively costly. And like I said, that was probably the one game where I actually thought he looked a little bit disheveled to where he was making more of a negative than positive difference. I guess I'll stop there.
And statistically, I mean, that was his worst playoff game statistically for sure. But you look as a whole, and I mean, when we're talking, especially me, like from fantasy analysis, we want to look at the big picture and the stats compiled and things like that. But Joe Burrow really does have that factor where, like, when the game is on the line and a play needs to be made, it seems like, he could have like 3 terrible quarters, but if they're hanging in, he's able to, scramble out and make that like extra play, like extend the play when he needs to, or like you said, throw up that jump ball to Jamar Chase in double coverage. It seems like he just has such a good read and feel for the game that even if you look at his overall numbers at the end of the game and they aren't eye-popping, he always seems to make the play right when the play needs to be made. So we've only seen him, in 2 playoff runs right now. So it's hard to say, is this a fluke or is it a trend? But we saw that a lot with Tom Brady too, where like he wouldn't always have the best game, but then in the 4th quarter, he'd make the plays when he needed to. So right now it's still early in Joe Burrow's career and people are going to want to discount him. But if he can continue to display this ability to just make plays when plays need to be made for the next few years, then I think people are stop having this narrative about it being fraudulent, because then we can see, hey, all right, well, he's done this for 4 straight years now. Maybe he's just a pretty good football player.
Yeah, I mean, if it gets to that point, then this narrative will have no choice but to be shot down. But do you think, I mean, how about again in the Super Bowl, right? We have that game looked like it could have gotten out of hand, and then all of a sudden OBJ goes down. And then all of a sudden the Rams could not run the ball, and they're averaging 1.9 yards per carry at the end of the game. They were gifted with Joe Burrow's throw up to T. Higgins. He rips Jalen Ramsey's face mask down, and he's got a 75-yard touchdown for free. How about the fact that after the half, the Rams come out, and Matthew Stafford throws a pick, and that was their opportunity to really take advantage of the game. And they did, but then they eventually were not able to really catch on to that traction. And the Rams, I mean, that was the Bengals game to lose after all of that happened. And you could argue,
I won't try to say that. Yeah, I'm not going to support that game or whatever. I mean, that was terrible. It was his first Super Bowl appearance ever, and he did it in his 2nd year in the league. So I'll give him a little bit of grace here for not having his best game, but yeah, I mean, he pissed his pants in that game. That was terrible.
What about the Ravens? The Ravens wild card game against Tyler Huntley. They probably don't win that game if that was a 14-point swing, that fumble recovery touchdown. All he had to do was outscore a Tyler Huntley-led offense, desolate Ravens offense, and he only puts up 17 points himself. What about that? Is there an excuse for that?
That's a good point. I'd kind of forgotten about that game. Yeah, I was flying back from Vegas and actually watching that one in the airport. My flight got bumped. I'd kind of forgotten about that game, but you're right. Yeah, that was a wild fumble away from swinging in the opposite direction. I don't know. Maybe this narrative does hold a little bit more water than I had anticipated.
What about the game against Tennessee in 2021? The Titans had, he didn't play bad this game. Let's get that straight. But the Titans had the ball with, I think, 2 minutes. I think it was 2 minutes and 30 seconds left or so. I think they had a timeout or two. Looked like they were going to be able to drive the field and kick the game-winning field goal. What does Ryan Tannehill do? He throws an interception. All he has to do is hit one pass to Jamar Chase, and they're in field goal range. Just another. It just feels like every single game that they played in the postseason, there was something that happened at the perfect time, and then he's able to capitalize on it, and then all of a sudden he's gone.
I'll say you prepped for this conversation a little bit better than I did watching back all the games, but now that you're bringing me through every single game and I'm remembering, you're making some good points. I hadn't even heard about this narrative prior to us hopping on and talking about this. I'm sure it's going around in Buffalo and Kansas City, but you're making good points.
Oh, I was huge on this right after his 2021 playoff run, and I was calling him overrated. And of course, he had a great year because that's always what happens when I make an absurd take. But He and then in 2021, I think I watched like 3 hours of game film today just preparing for this because I really think there's truth to it. And now this is me speaking literally. Like I do think Joe Burrow is a top 3 quarterback in the NFL. Like I'm not going to dispute that, but I think at the end of the day, when you look at was it 2021 when they beat the Chiefs in that massive comeback? He threw a pick at the beginning of the fourth quarter, trying to target Jamar Chase. I mean, if that's Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs any other day, for one, they're not back in the game. And for two, you throw a pick in that scenario, you're probably going to be reaping the consequences. And then the following drive, after the Bengals forced another punt, he almost threw a pick to Nick Bolton, was it Nick Bolton? He was sliding along the turf. He was going to throw it out of bounds. Nick Bolton slid. He would have caught it inbounds, but it went right through his hands. I mean, that's 2 drives in a row that he could have ended up throwing a pick, but I won't bore you to death any further.
So I do think that Joe Burrow, I will concede that having guys like T. Higgins and Jamar Chase makes his job a little bit easier. I mean, we talk again. I'm so like deep in the fantasy discussion this time of year that's what I'm thinking about. And we look at Joe Burrow and we just unanimously top 5, top 6. But a lot of that is because of the production that he's going to accrue over the point of the season. And a lot of that production comes from contested catches Jamar Chase is making and plays that he's making after the catch and what T. Higgins can do in the red zone. I say it all the time that if you swap Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert, plug Justin Herbert into the Cincinnati Bengals offense, probably have 2 rings at this point. I think that Justin Herbert is the better player. Burrow just has such a better supporting cast around him.
Yeah, I'm right behind you on that one. I mean, and Joe Burrow, for statistical purposes, does deserve the credit. I mean, at the end of the day, his seven postseason starts, he's got a 78.6 adjusted completion percentage, 1,800 yards, 9 touchdowns, 4 picks, 10 big time throws to 4 turnover worthy plays. I mean, and he gets 107 pressures in those 7 games. I think that's like 15 per game. I mean, he's done a pretty good job. You look at the numbers for what they are. There's tough angles to take. It's really granular, the angle that you have to take.
I'm going to go back and rewatch some of these playoff games. Like I said, I spent so much time focusing on regular season. I think I might go back and rewatch some of these. Because for me, I watch the postseason game. I watch it live, and then I usually don't go back and revisit postseason. Right. So this is a little bit out of my element, but you've piqued my interest for sure.
It really just felt like whenever the other team was about to make something happen and shut the door in the Bengals' face, something just completely absurd would go in their favor, and then the Bengals would capitalize.
I mean, yeah, that touchdown recovery against Baltimore, that one is still fresh in my mind. I had completely forgotten about that already. Yeah,
I was so pissed. I wanted the Bengals to lose that game so bad, and I'm like, this is going to be the touchdown that puts them ahead finally. All right, we'll be done with that conversation. I think I might have to really put it together and format some sort of video because I could talk about it for hours. Mark, Pug, I'm sorry I didn't see your comments earlier. I was bashing my head against the wall with this. But we'll move right on to our last segment, the most anticipated one of the show. And this is going to be the, where's the banner? Caveman's Quiz Game. If you are not familiar with the Caveman's Quiz Game, it goes as follows. I need a producer, man. Where's my damn banner? Headline. Here it is. Okay. The Caveman's Quiz Game. So this is how the quiz game goes. You get 8 questions, 2 easy, medium, and hard each. 1 impossible and 1 wager question. Easy equals 10, medium equals 20, hard equals 30, the impossible is 50, and the wager works like Final Jeopardy, of course. And if you get both questions per difficulty correct, you'll get a bonus of that point total. So you get both easy right, you get an extra 10 points, etc. And then, of course, for the final topic, you will be spinning a wheel, which will determine how much you want to wager, or at least help you in that effort. How are you at trivia? Any good?
We'll see. Everybody's, you get pretty objective with the easy, medium, and hard. Somebody's easy is somebody else's hard. So let's see how you did this.
I learned that the hard way when I first started this show. So I started to put together a Microsoft form and I send it out on my social medias and I let people determine how easy. Nice. It's like a 10-question thing. So I let the people, at least that do it, determine the difficulty because I figured that out quickly.
I'm ready, man. Let's do it.
Let's do it. So the first question, of course, is going to be an easy one, and it's going to be this. Where did Andy Dalton sign this offseason?
Carolina Panthers.
You would be correct. The Carolina Panthers indeed is where he signed. Easy 10 points right off the bat. Oh, by the way, which I did not mention to you, here's the leaderboard. I have had 5 episodes. You're the 6th, so you have an opportunity to find your way on here somehow.
Alrighty.
All right, so you got 10 points on the board. Already
Jarrett
good start.
just crushing the competition.
Jarrett came on here, got 1 hard and 1 impossible. He's the only person that's gotten an impossible question right so far, and that's really what pushed him over the hump here. But all right, second easy question is this. Who led the NFL in QB rushing yards last year? You might know this one.
Justin Fields.
Justin Fields would be correct.
Second most in NFL history.
That was not on purpose. 20 points on the board for you after the easy. Actually 30 because you get the bonus. And that will move us into the medium question, which is going to be this. Who is the highest drafted tight end in NFL history?
Oh, my God. I want to say Kyle Pitts, but I just know that isn't right. I know there was somebody before him. I was just looking at this very recently, too. I don't think it's Vernon Davis. I think Vernon Davis went 6th overall. You know, I'm going to go Kyle Pitts. I know that's not right, but that's...
No, you are right. It is Kyle Pitts.
Am I? All right.
It is Kyle Pitts. You almost overthought yourself into a corner there, but you are correct. It is Kyle Pitts. Drafted 5th overall, who I thought the Bengals could have... Was it the Bengals that were... Bengals were 4. Or whatever.
I remember when San Francisco traded up to 3 that they traded up for Kyle Pitts, and they're like, oh, they're going to run this set with Kyle Pitts and George Kittle, and they're going to be unstoppable. Imagine give up 3 firsts for a tight end.
Hey, I mean, now they got a quarterback that they drafted a lot, or they spent a lot of capital on that they might not even use. So probably better off being Kyle Pitts if that ends up being the case, to be fair. But 50 points. You are already, I think that puts you like 3rd or 4th on the leaderboard. Your second medium question is going to be this. Who is the oldest active head coach in the NFL currently?
Pete Carroll.
You are correct. You didn't waver for a second. That's 90 points.
Because he looks young. You know, he's out there like taking his shirt off when he meets DK Metcalf, chomping on the gum, running around on the field. He's a young soul.
He definitely is. When I first heard this, I heard this a couple of years ago when he was like still 68 or 69. I'm like, what the hell? That guy's that old? You would never guess. There are a lot of guys.
Everybody's picture. It's Bill Belichick. He looks like the oldest. That man looks like he's 105 years old right now.
Yeah, he is second. I think he's 70 or 69 right now. But Pete Carroll, 71 years young. Good for that man. 90 points on the board, though. You are crushing it going into the hard questions here. And the first hard one is going to be this. Who is the latest NFL player to retire from football and then pursue a career in the MMA?
Oh, man, I've got no MMA knowledge at all. The only guy I can think of that has gone this route, and I don't know if he was the most recent, but Greg Hardy.
You are right. It is Greg Hardy.
Woo!
Greg Hardy is correct. So that is another 30 points. You're up to 120.
Coming for you, Jared.
Shaking in his boots right now. He's shaking in his boots. Second hard question. Which QB has led the league in passing the most in NFL history? So per year. How many passing titles, I guess is the better way.
Pass attempts?
Passing titles.
Oh, passing titles. Dan Marino.
It is not Dan Marino. Drew Brees with 7.
I should have known that one. I was trying to think of one guy that was like way ahead of his time because like he didn't have the same competition where Drew Brees was playing with Aaron Rodgers and Phillip Rivers and Tom Brady.
Yeah, Drew Brees killed it. I mean, speaking of Dan Marino, I didn't know he had probably the worst send-off game in NFL history. Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
They got killed. I think they made the playoffs at 9-8 or something, and then got killed in the wild card by like 40 points, and then he got pulled like early in the third quarter.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I saw a TikTok about it like 3 weeks ago. I'm like,
that happens so often with NFL players too. Is like if you're in the NBA, like you get like a retirement tour where you're like selling out arenas, people are chanting names, and like you see like Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, these guys still averaging like 25 points per game in their final season. NFL players, a lot of times, like you don't even know they retire. It's just like, what happened? Like that guy hasn't played in 4 years, and then you look it up and you're like, oh, he can't make a team. Like it's sad in the NFL the way that their careers end.
It really is. And then you always, like you said, you're just like, where did he go? Oh, he's gone. Yeah. He just fizzled out.
Adrian Peterson, he had a cup of coffee with the Tennessee Titans and the Washington football team at the time, and it's like that's not how he should have gone out. Adrian Peterson should have gone out with like a 2,000-yard season, like couple stiff arms, but it's just like, and then he's in the news, like, I'm still looking for work. And then all of a sudden he's not, and he's retired. It's sad.
Yeah, I think that might unfortunately be what happens to some of these guys out on the free agent market right now, especially with the running backs, which is the sad reality. But anyway, 120 points on the board. Going into the impossible question. These are pretty tough, hence the name impossible. In 2014, the first Assistant Coach of the Year award was awarded to an assistant in the NFC, which is your hint. Who was the recipient?
2014. I'm completely guessing here. I think Kyle Shanahan was still an assistant coach then. Is it Kyle Shanahan?
It is not Kyle Shanahan. This one, I would have been shocked if anybody could come up with this one. It was Todd Bowles, though. Todd Bowles won assistant coach.
You gave me like 20 guesses. I might have gotten down to there.
You might have gotten there eventually, because you got to think, like, if he's winning assistant coach of the year, he probably
a head
coach eventually, right? But that's all right. You still have 120 going into the wager. And before you decide how many points you want to wager, we're going to figure out what the category is going to be. So I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to spin the wheel of categories, and we'll figure out what it's going to be. Wheel spin, and it is history. I don't know if you're shaking because of that. How's your history knowledge?
I don't know if you can hear my phone coming through. I just had to turn that off real quickly. All right.
Well, we'll see how good it is in just a second. How many points do you want to wager? You have 120. Let's pull up the. Well,
I'm going for 81 points is what I'm putting down. If you ain't first, you're last.
1 point. So
which
that
would put me at 201 if I hit it.
All right. Yeah, thank you for doing the quick math for me. So here we go. The history question is going to be this. Who was the Patriots' opponent during the Deflate Gate scandal?
Oh, my God. I should know this one. I feel like this is a coin flip. I'm going to throw it out there. Doesn't feel right. Hold on. Let me think about it for like another couple of seconds here.
Yeah, no time limit.
I'm trying to remember because it was a specific player that like caught on to it. And like, I feel like I could see it in my head. I don't think this is right. I'm going to go with the Colts.
You are right. It is the Colts.
Yes.
Wow. I didn't think you were going to get it after you say you didn't think it was right. I didn't know you were going to say the Indianapolis Colts would be correct. And that puts you at 201 total points after going for it all in the wager. Respect for that. Respect putting it all on the line. And it pays off. Congratulations, Dave. You're the leader of the Caveman's Quiz game now.
Thank you. Hopefully nobody. I'm sure it'll get passed up eventually, but I will hang my hat on that for the next few weeks as long as I can.
We'll see how. I think I'm going to do about 14, 15 episodes for the off season. So you got about 9 episodes to hang on. Hey, I wish you the best of luck. But by the way, Marino went out on a 62-7 high note. Yeah.
Oh.
It was ugly. And he didn't even finish the game. Not that, I mean, how could you possibly let your legend finish that game? But yeah, Dave, that's all I got for us tonight. Once again, I appreciate you taking the time. It was a blast, covering all of the NFL with you tonight. I appreciate it a lot.
Yeah, thanks a lot, man. Really appreciate it. Always fun connecting with new people in this space. So appreciate you reaching out. Glad we got to do this today, and we'll have to do it again sometime.
Absolutely, man. And if you guys are not following Dave already, especially if you're a big fantasy football guy, all of his links are down in the description. So be sure you check him out over there. Of course, if you enjoyed the cave, all of my links are down there as well. Like, subscribe. You guys know the drill. And I will see you guys next Thursday. Peace out.